But certainly good to see folks here. Glad to be back in the state. It's been 6 years running in Chicago, running Chicago Defender, also being at WVLN Radio. And so I spent a lot of time in this state. Things have been going quite well. We have been growing. Some of the people already come up to me, and I appreciate the folks who have been supportive of Roland Unfiltered, the Black Star Network. We launched the show 5 years ago, September, launched the network 2 years ago, and have been able to really grow it. Not just for my show. We then have a total of 7 shows on the network. And we just launched this week our 24-hour streaming channel on Amazon Prime Video, the live channel, Freebie, plus on Amazon Music, the Plex TV. And the reason that's important is because we're living in a world where we are having to ask other folk to tell our story. And one of the things that I've always said, I was unwilling to have to ask somebody else to tell our story. If you look at the history of Black-owned media, the reason we're here today is because Black-owned media covered our stories where other folks did not. And so when you have Black-owned media, you're not having to explain who Black people are and what Black folk do, and then you're not having to ask for permission. It was March 16, 1827, the nation's first Black newspaper was created, was Freedom's Journal. In the third paragraph, there was a quote, "We wish to plead our own cause, too long have others spoken for us." And I've always said that we will rule the day where we are asking somebody else to tell our story, because they'll be detrimental to our people, because there's so many things that happen every single day that don't get covered by mainstream media. There's so many stories that never bubble up to the top. People stop me literally every day. Before I came here, I stopped our store in Northern Virginia, and this sister, she said, "Watching your show has completely changed my life because there's so many things I never even knew about that you talk about." I've had a number of people come up to me and say, "You're the reason I understand politics or why I vote," or even people say, "Following you and watching your show is the reason I'm even entering politics, is how you've explained it." And so imagine all those folks who are out there who would have no idea about the issues that happen all across this country that you'll never see on MSNBC, Fox News, CNN, ABC, NBC, and CBS, because there are very few folks who look like me who are sitting in those offices. And even at some of those networks where you have folks who look like me, they don't think like me. When I was at TV1, it was always interesting when we would have folks who would come to us and they had worked at ABC News or worked at CBS, and then they would pitch stories, and I would always tell them, "I need you to wake up Black." And they would say, "I don't understand what you mean." They said, "I am Black." I said, "No." I said, "You don't wake up Black." And they really could not quite understand what I was trying to say. And so I had to explain to them that when you work in mainstream media, you literally are trained to think and decide the stories that white America is interested in. And in fact, we're here in Peoria. For the last 16 years of media all across this country, literally what news directors and executives would say is, "What do the people of Peoria think?" And I never understood that, because how many people in this city? No. I want you to think about that. I mean, that, like, literally, executives would say, I worked in Dallas at KRLD Radio. We had a news director who was from Wisconsin, I think. And his name was Jack Hines. And see, here's always the deal. I call people's names. So if you do something stupid, I'm going to call your name for the rest of my life. So he came to me and he actually said to me that I needed to work on my voice and my diction because I had a twang. I said, "We in Dallas. Your ass not from Dallas. Clearly, people in Dallas understand how I talk." It was the craziest thing. And he said, "Well, in media, we always focus on how folks talk in Peoria." And I said, "Bro, we are not in Peoria." And so that was always this. And so what happens is in media, folks say, well, we have to project to what the middle of the country thinks. I said, no, we might want to project to the middle of the country, the east and the west and the south and the southeast, because you're covering the entire nation. And so when you only have that world view, then all of a sudden you leave out so many stories. I get a kick out of these people all across this country, and they say, well, they talk about flyover states. They talk about we should be focused on the coast. And I'm going, yeah, you might want to focus on the coast, because what that then you leave out the rest of the country. And then when I have these clashes with media executives, and they talk about, well, let's talk about the middle of the country, and they always talk about rural America. But whenever they say rural America and the working class, they never quite talk about folks who look like me. And so I'm saying all of that because we have to understand what are the natural biases that exist in media. So the reason you see the stories that you see and read the stories that you see is because folks are deciding who should see stuff. There are radio stations in this country, and even in major cities, where they'll say, well, these are where the high income earning folks live. So therefore, let's tailor our news to those folks. And I will go, well, what about the rest of the city? Because don't those folks matter too? And that's part of the problem in media when you have few African Americans, Latinos, and Asians and Native Americans, where you have very few women. Who controls mass media? That's why it's called mass media. And so Black-owned media has played a huge role. And so the years I spent on Tom Journal Morning Show, running the Chicago Defender, Houston Defender, Dallas Weekly, Savoy Magazine, Black America Web, all of that matters because in those places, we aren't having to explain who we are. In fact, when I was at TV1, this was the funniest story. Our founding president, CEO, was my alpha brother, Jonathan Rogers. And Jonathan got replaced by Sister named Wanya Lucas. And then Wanya got replaced by an executive, Brad Daniels. And it was always interesting because one day Brad, we were in his office, and Brad, he said, well, I keep seeing, Brad Siegel. Brad said, I keep seeing these same stories, and I don't understand, it's just like I'm watching the news, and it's sure like every day it's the same, and you're leading with these police brutality cases. I was like, yeah, Brad, because Black people keep getting shot. And so then he wanted me to one day, this is a true story, y'all. He wanted me to do an explainer at the top of the show why we are covering the stories that we're covering. I said, Brad, you like everybody else know why I'm covering them. And I was like, Brad, let me help you out. Why don't you go focus on sales and let me do the news? Now, let me explain why I had to say that. What Brad didn't understand was he was the president of a Black network. I said, Brad, I don't have to explain to Black people why I'm covering voter suppression, police brutality, lack of investment in Black-owned companies, because that's why we're here. And so it was quite an education for Brad and me working in the Black network. And so I was like, Brad, I got the news. You go focus on sales, and then we'll have this whole thing handled. And he sort of looked at me like I was crazy, because he was sort of like, am I not the CEO of the network? And I was like, yes, you are. Now let me go back to do what I do. Because again, I wasn't about to explain to our people why we do these things. I said, I need you coming into our spaces to learn about us, not me having to explain to you what it is that we do. And that's critically important, because if we're talking about a world of allies, that's part of the deal, because we're living in a world where for so long, we as African Americans have had to make other folks feel comfortable when we begin to talk about issues of race and systemic racism, things that are happening. When you have laws that are being passed in this country right now, where they're actually saying that if there's a white student who feels uncomfortable discussing a topic, then the conversation shuts down. When you have a superintendent in Oklahoma school superintendent who literally said, We can teach about the Tulsa race massacre, but we gotta leave race out. That's kind of hard to teach about the Tulsa race massacre, where black people were slaughtered, where Black Wall Street was destroyed, and the black part is kind of important. But that's literally where we are right now in this country. We're in a space where after all of these years, we now have folks in power who are afraid of the topics. When you have Moms for Liberty that's taking over school districts that are populated by African Americans, and one of the first things that they're doing is they're firing black superintendents. Charleston, South Carolina, just last week, you got a black superintendent. He's been there 3 months, and already he's been put on paid administrative leave. These things are happening all across the country, and I think for a lot of us, we really aren't paying attention. I know somebody sitting here who's saying, "Oh, no, I'm paying attention." No, I don't think we really are paying quite attention. It reminded me of, I love this scene from Scandal, one of my favorite shows. And it was a scene where Joe Morton, Papa Pope, was talking to Kerry Washington, played by Olivia Pope, when they were in the park. And he said, "You're skipping around in a field full of bombs and mistaking them for days." And I think there are a whole bunch of folks today, I believe, in this city, in this state, in this region, in this country, who are walking around acting as if things are wonderful. And oh my God, look at the daisies, and there are bombs that are literally going all around us. And I'm not saying that's white America. I'm saying black folks, Latinos, and Asians, because we have to understand that we literally are at. So turn to your neighbor, because if you don't remember anything I say, you might remember the title. Turn to your left and say, "We are at war." Now turn to your right and say, "We are at war." And let me be real clear, y'all might have in the past come to the NAACP Peoria Freedom Fund dinner, and you came here for an unseasoned chicken dinner. And a rock hard cake. And y'all saw some folk get awards who take pictures, and you go on the same way you came. But let me remind folk in the room, whether you are white or black, straight or gay, preacher or layman, it's called a Freedom Fund dinner. So if you came this year and you thought you were coming to the same banquet that you have come to for the last 60 years, I can guarantee you, y'all invited the wrong row. So this ain't gonna be the same banquet. And so go ahead, you buckle up. Some of y'all gonna get real uncomfortable. You're gonna be looking around, or maybe you're gonna be afraid to look around, and I be looking at you. And you might be say, "Is he talking to me?" I'm telling you in advance, yes, I'm talking to you. If you're an elected official, it's going to be uncomfortable for you, because there's a lot of folk who come to our communities asking for votes and then disappear, and then they show up to Negro checkoff events, take selfies, and they go back to where they are doing the exact same thing they have been doing, not delivering, and then somehow want us to vote for them again. So I'm just giving you advance warning that it's going to be a little uncomfortable, but you'll be okay. You can survive the next 30 minutes. I set this up by saying we are at war, because that's literally where we are. When you have the leading candidate on the Republican side, based upon polls, who is a domestic terrorist, who led the attempted overthrow of a country, and then when you have the individual supporting him who did not believe the last election was fair, then you need to understand exactly what kind of country we are now living in. When you have the individuals who were associates in that domestic attack on this country, who are still sitting in Congress right now, who are leading the House, when you have the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan, leading committees, and they were the same folks plotting and planning the overthrow of his government, and they have ignored subpoenas and they're still sitting in power. You might need to understand that this is not business as usual. When you have people all around this country right now, when you have governors and state legislatures who literally are ignoring the rule of law, but they call themselves the party of law and order and won't even abide by Supreme Court decisions, and then they come back when they get rejected, go back to their state, don't even redraw a second black congressional district in Alabama, and then try to have it sent back to the court. And luckily, shockingly, this right-wing court rejected that. And so now in Alabama, they have to create a second black district. And then you have the attorney general of that state who literally writes a public letter to the citizens of the state that sounded as if he was the son of George Wallace. And then he wants to act like he was talking for all folks in Alabama. I'm talking specifically, his name is Steve Marshall. And so this is what Steve Marshall wrote on September 26th, after the special master announced of the redrawing of those lines. He literally said, and the case was the Allen versus the Milligan case, he said, today the U.S. Supreme Court denied Alabama's request for emergency relief in the state's redistricting case. The state will now be encumbered with a racially gerrymandered court-drawn map for the 2024 election. And the reason that's hilarious is because the reason they lost was because they racially gerrymandered a map. They did not want to create a second black district because they knew if they created a second black district, it would guarantee a Democrat was going to be elected. So instead of competing for black votes and try to have policies that speak to black folks in Alabama, they would rather create all the districts that have one Democrat, Terry Sewell, and the rest are white Republicans. But see, they were like, no, we're not doing that. And so when the Supreme Court kicked it back, they said, well, no, we're just going to redraw new lines and not even create a second black district. Then the white Republicans in Louisiana said, we're going to file the Alabama case because they really thought, hey, it's going to go back to the courts. If Brett Kavanaugh sides with us, we're going to win the second time. Now Louisiana is trying to change what they're doing. Then you got Florida, where Florida Governor Ron Satan DeSantis is in court because he obliterated, yes, I said Satan, because when you ignore your legislature, when you obliterate 2 black congressional districts, you go against the law of the land. The courts ruled that that was unconstitutional. And this week in court, one of his top aides said the state Supreme Court got it wrong. Then they said that this district simply violated the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution. And one of the conservative judges then said, I'm sorry, has any court told you it violated the Equal Protection Clause? They said, no, that's simply our opinion. So a judge is going, oh, so y'all now get to make judicial decisions when you are the executive branch, but you're not the judicial branch. A case is going on in Georgia right now. You've got cases happening all across the country where Republican legislatures are absolutely denying representation of black voters all across the South, but then they try to say, oh, these things are race neutral. Today in Georgia, an appeals court put in a stay where you have white conservative, and let me be real clear why I'm being very specific when I use phrases, because in America, for the longest, if the president or the mayor or the governor met with some black preachers, the news story would say, governor meets with black preachers. Yet if he met with white evangelicals, it would say, governor meets with evangelical. So the reality, and I love it when people tell me, Roland, that's identity politics. I said, whiteness is an identity. If it's not, then you don't quite understand American history and white nationalism and white supremacy. And anybody in Peoria who's uncomfortable with what I'm talking about, all I need you to do is travel 73 miles from here and go to Springfield, Illinois, because you cannot be uncomfortable with what I'm talking about when the very institution you are sitting in right now was created because of a race riot that launched 73 miles from here and led to the creation of the NAACP. Excuse me if I'm not from Florida or South Carolina and I actually read a history book. And so you have white conservative Ed Bloom in Texas, who led the affirmative action case, who's now suing a black venture capital firm out of Atlanta because they have grants for black women entrepreneurs. And so he's saying this is grossly unfair to white women in America, when white women in America have benefited more than anybody else from affirmative action. When African Americans get 2% or less of all venture capital dollars, black women 0.5%. And so somehow Ed Bloom is saying that's just too much. Well, so you take the affirmative action case, and then you begin to take the school. Now you have the firing of superintendents, and now you have the change when it comes to school books, and you have folks saying, well, let's get any book that has Toni Morris's name or Ta-Nehisi Coates' name or other African-American authors. These things are happening before our very eyes, and these people somehow are saying, oh, this is right, this is fair, and it is just, where they won't even talk about the idea of systemic racism. And then you have these so-called brothers who are Republicans who are running for president. This week at the Reagan Library stands before all of those largely white Republicans and actually says black people survived slavery. Black people got through slavery, but we didn't survive the Great Society because the resources they were given to mothers, and they kicked the father out of the house where anybody actually read the book. I don't know about the education in South Carolina, but maybe Tim Scott might need to remember that South Carolina, his state, was the first one to secede from the Union because of the issue of slavery. Maybe they didn't have the right textbooks in South Carolina, but if anybody actually studies the Great Society, they will realize that all of those benefits were not for African Americans. And in fact, if you go before that, welfare was not created for black people in the country. FDR created welfare for poor white people in the country. And if you were black, you couldn't even qualify for welfare. You couldn't apply for welfare. Social Security benefits were not created for black people in this country. They were created for white Americans. You had black people who could not even move into public housing. If you don't believe me, go check your history in Michigan and in Chicago. When black families moved into public housing on the west side of Chicago, 3,000 white folks rioted and ran them out of their neighborhood. So please tell me, how is it that we have all of this in our history, but I forgot we can't teach that stuff because you can't bring up black, because a white child today might be just a little uncomfortable. Well, maybe if we have more white students today who are uncomfortable with American history, then they have a better understanding of what we're trying to do to fix where we are today, because that has been the problem in America. Too many folks have been comfortable with what we have done. Too many people have been comfortable with where we have been. And what do? We run around and have our MLK events, and we don't want to talk about the other MLK. We want to talk about that nice civil rights bobblehead figure who loved everybody, got along with everybody. I swear, between him and Jesus, don't nobody want to talk about the radical parts of Jesus and Dr. King. Nobody wants to talk about the Dr. King who talked about going to the nation and cashing a check, stamp insufficient funds. Oh, we love talking about Dr. King in the bottom of his speech. I call the hoop part. We talk about I have a dream, but don't nobody want to deal with the thesis. See, if you're some of y'all who go to church, see, y'all tell somebody, man, church was off the chain. They say, well, how was it? Oh, pastor was preaching. What he preaching about? I don't know. He was preaching. That means you got excited about the part, but you can't even remember what the scripture was. The scripture is the thesis of the sermon, not the hoop part. And that's where King was. A lot of us see today, we talk about Dr. King in the mountaintop speech, April 3rd, 1968 at Masonic Temple. We talked about going to the mountaintop, but you can't focus on the bottom 2 minutes of that sermon and ignore the 41 minutes we talked about targeting companies that won't do business with African Americans. We name check them. We talked about we have to redistribute the pain, that the sanitation workers were going through in Memphis. See, don't nobody want to talk about that because that requires us to challenge folk where they are. We are at war in this country. You see, for the last 14 years, I've been talking about this. My new book is called White Fear, How the Browning of America is Making White Folks Lose Their Minds. And somebody said, hey, Roland, you really went there with your title. Like, yes, I did. Cover photo on that title is a white man with his arms outstretched in front of the Capitol on January 6th, which symbolizes all this is ours. Because see, let me remind y'all about January 6th. Why were they there on January 6th? Because Donald Trump was mad with 4 cities. He was mad because he kept mentioning Fulton County, Atlanta, Philadelphia, Detroit, Milwaukee. What do those 4 cities have in common? Black people. In fact, in Wisconsin, the Trump campaign did a partial recount in the state of Wisconsin. Where did they do a recount? Milwaukee. The top Republican in Michigan actually said, let's count all the votes in Michigan except those in Detroit. So the folk who were there on the Capitol on January 6th were mad because black folks turned out in significant numbers and they voted for Biden and Harris. That's why they were upset. Oh, if you think I'm wrong, go to North Carolina, 2008. President Barack Obama win North Carolina by 14,100 votes. What did the Republicans immediately do after the 2010 midterms? Change the voting laws. Since 2010, they have been engaged in a war in North Carolina where they have been using the power of the legislature to roll back the laws repeated. This is the same Republicans in North Carolina where a federal judge ruled there was a precision-like targeting of black voters. They were so stupid in North Carolina, they actually asked in emails, when do black people vote early? 70% of black folks voted early voting in the first 2 weeks. They changed the law to have one voting location in every county. Now, how you gonna have one voting location in Charlotte, that huge city, one location, because they were trying to shrink the election? Voter ID, when you had the leader in Pennsylvania who said before the 2012 election, we will win because of voter ID. In Georgia, the Speaker of the House, now deceased, he said, if we allow ballot drop boxes and automatic voter registration, and we allow sending out mail-in ballot, we will never win. So the same party that stands before you talking about how patriotic they are and salute the troops and praise the troops and talking about freedom all around the world, how is it can they be the same folk who want to deny the most basic fundamental right in this country, and that is the right to vote? And so they're using multiple tactics to actually do this. They're sitting here now saying, oh, well, Texas literally passed the law that says if you are an elected official, you can't even tell your constituents about requesting a ballot. You've got folks now saying, well, we'll make a ballot available, but we're not going to mail it out. Oh, we'll make a ballot available, but we're not going to send the postage. Oh, we'll make the ballot available, but we're not going to, I'm sorry, if it comes in after 7:30 p.m. on election day, the ballot don't count. Well, I gave it early. The post office late. No, we don't care if the post office late. If it gets here 7:31, it doesn't count. They were so dastardly. The last election, they tried not to count military ballots in some states. What I'm talking about is we are seeing an all-out assault on voters, and they're not just black. I've been saying to white America, if you young and white, you got a bullseye on your behind just like us. 2016, a white clerk in Wisconsin admitted moving an early voting location off of a college campus because she said too many of them were voting Democrat. What they have been doing is moving voting locations away from places with large parking lots to places far out with small parking lots. So when you show up and you see a long line, you get frustrated and you go home. That is a tactic being implemented all across the state. You think I'm lying? My native Texas, Harris County, which is actually larger than several states in this country, during COVID, they had drive-through voting. Now, let me explain drive-through voting. That means you sit in your car, drive up, roll your window down, they hand you a ballot, you vote, and give it back. These fools, Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick, the governor and lieutenant governor, said that violates the privacy of the vote. I'm sitting in my damn car. That's more private than me walking into a place in a booth. So they targeted Chris Collins and Harris County to stop that. But let me tell you how evil these folks are. And yes, I'm using the word evil for a reason. This legislature, they passed a law that says if there are any irregularities, the Secretary of State can call for a new election in that county. Oh, I'm sorry. There are 254 counties in Texas. The law they voted on applied to one county, Harris. When is the last time you ever seen folks pass a state law that applies to one county? Well, why? Well, one, Harris is blue. Two, Harris is black. Three, Harris is brown. Uh-oh, it's three things in common: black, brown, blue. Because they are mad because they've been losing in Harris County. Losing the mayor's race, losing the county judge, losing the county commission, losing the judges. What does that mean? They've been losing power. Literally passed a law applying to one county. What I'm laying out to you are literally a broad base of attacks that are happening in America. There is a war that is going on. There's a war that is being well funded. Literally Leo, who led the Fairless Society, who literally controls the federal courts, who frankly has bought and paid for Clarence Thomas. Yes, bought and paid for. I swear Clarence Thomas is a thought. He's been flown out by billionaires, changing his votes. Oh, I'm going to call it like it is. Because you can't just tell me how all of a sudden, all through the... How you going to have a billionaire that bought your mama's place and they paid for the renovations? And you, come on, y'all, come on now. Come on now. Let's not even sit here and play games here. They are literally using billions of dollars to change the system that we are seeing. And a bunch of us are walking around and thinking, it's all good. It's just fine. You have certain billionaires who are buying whole legislatures, county commission courts, city council, mayor's races all across the country, especially in the South. You have the laws that are being changed, targeting everything. You have a Tennessee judge that ruled against the federal 8A program, where you had a white woman who sued because she said, I couldn't apply for the program because it was for Black and Latinos, yet the same white woman got 2 contracts in a women program. But she said, and she didn't even apply for the program, when that said she actually sued for it, and the judge still granted her that permission. These things are happening before our very eyes. And let me be real clear right now. I need to talk specifically to the white women in the room. Y'all have got to speak the hell up and stand up, because again, there's been no group that has benefited more from state, federal, county, school, city contracts than white women in America. MWBE stands for Minority Women Business Enterprise. If you're a Black woman, you in the M. If you're Latina, you in the M. If you're Asian, you in the M. The W really should be W'd up. And they are literally coming after these programs. When I was at Texas A&M, I was in a speech and communications class, and we were speaking on affirmative action. And so I'm sitting here getting my presentation, and I asked all the students, I said, if any of your mothers have businesses, raise your hand. And they raised their hands. Do any of your mothers have contracts with the city, county, state, federal? They raised their hand. Congratulations, affirmative action, paying for your school. Boy, they got mad at me. I was like, don't get mad at me. Call your mama. She'll tell you. Numbers don't lie. Numbers don't lie. Well, see, this is what happens when you don't understand history. If you are a white woman in America, do understand. Thank black people. Because you had a racist congressman in Virginia, Judge Smith, who inserted women into the 1964 Civil Rights Act, thinking it was going to cause it to fail. It actually passed. And so when Title IX was approved in 1972, that opened the professional schools to doctors and lawyers and dentists and engineers, no group benefited more from Title IX than white women in America. Title IX was not about sports. It was about opening the professional schools to women who were being denied graduate programs. So you had an influx of doctors and lawyers and dentists and engineers and architects. That was because of Title IX. Where does Title IX come from? It's a provision of the 1964 Civil Rights Act that black folks put on the line. If you are Latino or Asian and you're voting today in your native language, you might want to be thanking black people, because were it not for the 1965 Voting Rights Act, you would not be able to vote in your native language. If you gay in America and you love the fact that the Supreme Court affirmed marriage equality, you might want to thank black people, because the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause, was one of the Reconstruction Amendments that was passed after the end of slavery in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. If you are disabled in America, when you were had with the 1996 American Disabilities Act, you better be thanking black people, because that's the provision of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. What am I saying? There's been no law in America that has dealt with civil rights and economic rights that black folks have fought for that has not benefited everybody else who wasn't black. So when we're asking you to stand with us because it was our sweat and our labor and our blood that got those laws passed. So don't today cash checks when we cashed the check of blood when the bill got passed. We are facing a country that is in absolute denial of how we got here. As a podcast down in Florida called PPD Podcast, I didn't know who the hell they were. They hit me and they hit my publicist and they said, well, let's have them on the show. I didn't even look them up. I didn't care. I'd debate anybody anywhere. Because y'all know Fox News ain't going to call me. Down. Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, none of them. They like, nah, we going to leave that Negro alone. In fact, they invite all the other black people on my show and not me. He like, no, we going to leave that one alone. In fact, that was a sister who used to work there. She told me when Roger Ailes, she said, Ro, they got a file on you. Roger Ailes had a file. She said, no, they got a thick file on you. She said, they have every comment that you've ever made on Twitter or publicly about Fox News. I said, that's a big-ass file, then. I said, they're not going to call me. I said, no, because, see, I'm going to give it to you straight. Straight, no chasing. Ask Chris Christie what happened when we won ABC 2 years ago. Chris Christie wanted to get some credit for his speech at the Reagan Library against Trump. And I was like, no, Doc. I said, you're going to own up to what you did to put him in office in 2016 and trying to get him reelected in 2020. Then he turned, y'all don't understand, man, he turned red. That's why, I stole a pork chop from Chris. He was hot. My man was so mad. Listen, when that segment was over, he walked off the set livid. I know for a fact because we went to some executives. That was an ambush. I was like, how was it an ambush when I was a guest? You were a contributor getting paid $400,000 a year. They brought up your speech. I didn't bring it up, but I damn sure talked about it. And he was hot. And that was September 17th, 2021. They ain't had me back. But guess what? That sucker get replayed every 6 months. So let me explain to some of y'all why that happens. See, what happens is sometimes we get invited to these shows. People say, I don't really want to go too hard because I want to get invited back. Ain't no guarantee they're going to ever invite you back. So that's why you swing as hard as you can while you are there. So if they never invite you back, they're going to feel the pain of you swinging 2, 3, 4 years later. I can guarantee you, when Chris sees my face, he's like, oh, he feel the pain. That's what they do. The reason I go so hard is because I understand what is at stake. And what is at stake is that we have a nation where there are forces who do not want us to move forward because this is about power. Power and money. I need you to understand, if you ever go to D.C., you stand in front of the White House, look to your left. There's an agency to your left. There's a building to your left. That's the Treasury Department. America in one picture is right there. White House is power, Treasury is money. Power, money, money, power. That's all you need to understand about America. And when you begin to see these folks, the Tucker Carlsons of the world, the Bill O'Reillys of the world, the Glenn Becks of the world, talking about the great replacement theory, they're afraid because America is changing. These are the same folk who were saying the exact same thing after Brown versus Board of Education. These are the same folk who were saying the exact same thing after Reconstruction. Because what they do not want to relinquish is power. When you begin this, when they said, no, we're going to control the federal courts. When Mitch McConnell purposely blocked 100 federal judges when Obama was president and left them open so when Trump came in, he was able to appoint more than 200 judges. That was by design. They said, I remember Mitch McConnell's on Sean Hannity's show, and he specifically said, we are going after young judges. They were appointing, in fact, Trump appointed one white woman who was 11 years out of law school, had never tried a case, but named her to a lifetime appointment on the federal bench. She got on at 35. If she served as long as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she will be a federal judge until 2053. Need us to understand what is going on here. It's power. Since 2009, I've been talking about that. My book, I talked about the opening. Study was done. Question was asked, are you optimistic about the future of America for your children? Every group, Black, Latino, Asian, Native American, every group more than the majority said yes. There was only one group that was less than the majority, white American. And I was kind of like, what's behind that? See, part of the problem is a lot of us, we're not deeper than mustard on a hot dog. We don't ask the second and third and the fourth question. September 2016, the question was asked, are you optimistic about the future of America economically for the next 10 years? Black people, lowest wealth, highest optimism. That's an oxymoron. How are the brokest people having the highest optimism? Latinos, second lowest wealth, second highest optimism. Asian Americans, 3. White America, highest wealth, lowest optimism. Again, ask the question. 2016, you always heard those stories. Oh, maybe it's the people voted that way in Michigan and other places, economic anxiety. I'm like, the brokest people probably have the most economic anxiety. But they were not asking Black folks that. It was literally a new story being painted. I remember Michael Moore's on MSNBC, and he said, we need to be learning from these people. I was like, no, we don't. They need to be learning from us. I'm sorry. Our world has changed. You no longer are going to have a manufacturing facility in rural parts of America, and the entire town was evolving around that facility. Funded the businesses, paid the taxes. That world has literally gone. We can sit here and pine for it, but that world is gone. Technology has changed that game. And so what happens is politicians come to us, sell us a lie. Trump, I'm bringing manufacturing back. Still wait. And so that's what we're dealing with. We're talking about people who are angry that the world is changing. 30 plus years ago, when a study came out saying America one day was going to be a nation majority of people of color. People were like, man, I'm gonna be dead by the time that happens. I ain't worried about it. Because the initial number is supposed to be around 2050. All of a sudden, several things happen. Black people, Latino, kept having babies. White folks started having babies. Now, if you're uncomfortable with what I'm saying, use Google. The average, there are more than 10 states right now in America where the average white death rate is higher than the average white birth rate. This is simple. Having fewer kids, it's going to be a few of you in the future. Look at Europe the last 15 years. Why have there been immigration battles in Italy, France, Germany? Because of African migration. All those folks in those countries have been, that's why you've seen the rise of right-wing extremism in those countries. They're targeting African immigrants. Why? Because fewer Italians, Germans, French, and others are having children. You're not going to have a future if you continue to have a decreased GDP. You need people to replace those who are not born to have a future. Look at small town America. If you had 5,000 residents 50 years ago, you had 3,000 residents 30 years ago, you got 1,000 residents today. I'm just saying the possibility of people moving back, it ain't there. And so that's the America that we're seeing. And so why are people freaking out? Because you're seeing more African Americans in power. You're seeing more Latinos in power. It's because, look at the data, folks. After Reconstruction, what was the greatest fear after the end of slavery? Okay, fine, they free, but they're not going to take our jobs. What was the greatest fear after the Civil Rights Movement? All right, y'all can go to parks, y'all can sit here and sit in buses, don't take our jobs. Well, guess what? When you create economic opportunities, education opportunities, we now are going to be able to compete. That is the anger that we're seeing before our very eyes. It's playing out in every sector. And so we've got to own up to what is going on and to realize that as you begin to see African Americans and Latinos and Asians and others begin to grow in this country, you're going to see folks saying, hey, we want those jobs too. It's not going to be a situation where you have in many quarters 95, 98% folks to control it. Right now, do you understand when it comes to private equity in America, it literally is controlled by 98% of white men. Those are the folks who are buying companies. We talk about venture capital. We keep talking about, venture capital. They don't loan money to blacks and Latinos. But guess where the venture capital money comes from? I'm going to show you. Stand up if you are a public worker, retired, or you still work, meaning you're a police officer, firefighter, teacher, you work for the city, county, state, or federal. You're a public worker, stand up. I'm going to show y'all something y'all ain't never thought about this yet. The people standing, and I'm going to blow y'all away. Follow me, y'all keep standing. The people standing up represent the most wealth in America. Let me help some of y'all out because y'all look at me real confused right now. The people standing up represents most wealth in America. Public workers have pensions. I'm not done. Pension money is invested in companies. Private equity and venture capitalists go to pension funds to invest money into private equity companies to get a greater return on investment. So if the people who are standing, if you don't like the fact that venture capitalists loan less than 2% of their money to African Americans, you should be saying, it's my money. And that's the problem. Y'all can take a seat. we have to understand literally what is driving this economy. Every company that goes public on Wall Street goes to the Illinois Teachers Fund, the California Pension Fund, the New York Pension Fund, the Texas Pension Fund, because that's where the greatest wealth in this country. BlackRock controls 75% of the federal pension fund. The data shows that Black and brown companies have greater returns than non-minority pension funds, yet Black and brown pension funds are getting less than 1.5% of private equity bonds. When Obama was president, I got called to me in the Treasury Department, and they said Black and brown companies outperform white companies when it came to TARP funds. I went, cool. That mean they gonna get more money to invest? Looked at me like I was crazy. I went, well, isn't that how it works? If I outperform you, then I get to do bigger deals because I outperform you. Everybody went quiet. It's a money game and it's a power game. It is a fear of sharing. And I'm not saying all whites in America. Let me be perfectly clear. You had white folks who stood with African Americans in the creation of the NAACP, folks who were on the front lines in the civil rights movement. But we have to be honest and open that there are some people in this room, we got some family members who are the problem. There are things that they say at the table that a lot of us like, oh, they make us cringe. No, sometimes we need to be confronting those folks at the table. See, what happens is there are people who are sitting in positions right now where you have folks in power who literally are denied. Why do we even need a Crown Act in America? Why do we have to pass a law that says you should not discriminate based on somebody's hair? Why? Because Black folks with cornrows and locks and braids are being denied jobs, not because of what's in their head, but because of what's on their head. That is the America that we're living in. So when I say we are at war, we need to understand that these bombs are going all around us, and too many of us are just walking through, dancing through like it's daisies, and they're trying to understand why is her limbs blown off? Because she stepped on a landmine. We got folks who are in power positions who do not want to share it, and they want to hold on to old America. Let's make America great again. Please let me know what decade you are talking about so I can check the receipts on what it was like for us during that period. Every person in this room, if you came here with the right intention, you need to understand that this gathering is supposed to represent sort of like wedding renewal vows. This is not an event you're supposed to come to take selfies. This is not an event you're supposed to come to just to clap for those who got some awards. This event is supposed to represent your annual commitment to the causes and the issues that this organization stands for. If you are here and you are unwilling to fund the fight, if you're unwilling to put your feet on the ground to stand and protest, if you're unwilling to write letters, to send emails, to make phone calls, then all you're doing right now is occupying space. And what you should do is not come back next year. Now, somebody be like, no, Roland, don't say that because we appreciate them by the ticket. No, I dare say, if you are sitting in this room and you are not truly committed to the work of the Peoria, Illinois NAACP chapter, then what you are doing is representing a fraud. What you are doing is simply saying, I'm here to wave and one day out of the year, but I'm not here to stand with you. You should be saying, Mr. President, what do you need me to do? Where should I call? Where should I picket? Who should I be pushing? Who should I be challenging? Where should we be going? And if you can't do it because you're in a walker and you're in a wheelchair, then there's a phone that you can use. There's an email that you can send. There's a text that you can send. If you are in a war, you cannot have generals. You need troops to fight the battle. We have enough generals who have given us the outline and the plan to fight the forces of evil in this country. And now is the time for troops to stand up. And you must remember, like our friend for the bird of Woodson Tandy said, we will fight until hell freezes over, and then we will end guys. Sir. Yes. Sir. Now saying that babies on that reform all the time back. Yeah. You good? Oh my God. Some people all do what God is in the sea. That's hat on the chat. We're sending dead to the sea. And we're like, listen, lots to put a foot down so full and lay it down. In of it all, our celebrity, the NAACP is end of our people. Then is the all be for the place. Then it's your prayer and the other TV. And these sons where it is a Jews stay year all forward. We can do is to have you. We, if you are really very clear, so I have a city, read, and the start CS wins, 1 to 60, or I'm ready on 5 solid.